Welcome, everybody, to Stay Curious. I'm your host, Mark Marquette, on this November 14th, 2025. This is the date 56 years ago that mankind was repeating its greatest adventure, that being the journey to the moon that Apollo 11 did in July. And the Apollo 12 astronauts were launched today on a mighty Saturn V rocket, and that's going to be the thrust of our show today. So always the moon launches and moon time frame when we talk about the 6 moon landings makes me smile because I get to block a lot of hoaxers out there that say stupid things on our Facebook page. And if you're one of those on our show today, you'll be out of here forever. We'll never hear from you again. So, of course, we went to the moon. Marty Winkle, my co-producer, worked on the lunar module, part of his career for NASA. And Marty and I were talking about that a little bit earlier. It's just to me, it smacks of non-patriotism to say that we didn't go to the moon. One of the greatest technological feat, and our good friend Jay Honeycutt, former Kennedy Space Center director. We've talked a lot about Jay. Jay's been on the show here. We'll be on here in the near future. And he was asked at an event I was at, what do you say to people that say we didn't go to the moon? And Jay Honeycutt said, well, my standard answer has been one, we were barely smart enough to go to the moon. So how in the hell could we be smart enough to fake it? Okay. Good point, Jay Honeycutt. So let's talk about what's going on 56 years ago in a minute. Let's talk about what's going on right now as we have a star party in Titusville this Saturday where the Brevard Astronomical Society and our museum is going to, with the city of Titusville, is going to host a good stargaze. Weather looks great, 5 to 8 at Spaceview Park. And we'll have some volunteers there with a table to set up with a simple STEAM project for the kids. I will be at another event, the Native Rhythm Festival in Melbourne. It's free if you're local at Wickham Park. I'm going to be doing a Saturday evening Stars and Skylure of the Native Americans and have some of the members of our astronomical club with telescopes there also. So I'm so happy that our museum is doing multiple events in multiple places, Marty. We were years ago barely able to do one event in the public. So this is what we do now, and we're proud of it. All right. So some space history also going on. Now 10 humans are orbiting Earth as we've gotten Shenzhou 20 back to Earth. But the circumstances are very interesting, as here you have astronauts Chen, and Wang, after they've returned from, they were up there about 215 days, something like that, 220 days. About a week later than they wanted to, they were coming back Halloween Day, October 31st, and their spaceship, Shenzhou 20, was discovered to have some anomaly. Something hit it. A space debris hit it and created a problem with one of the systems. China isn't revealing what exactly the problem was, but it apparently was a big enough impact that they could visually see where this impact was. So they did not return in their ship that they went up in. They came back in the Shenzhou 21 spaceship that was launched a little over a week ago with the new crew. And though they were delayed about a week, they came back in a spaceship that was designed to not bring them back. They abandoned their spaceship that took them up. It's damaged, so that leaves 3 Tachionauts up there without any safety net, Marty, as the way I look at it. And Marty, I don't have my devices over here to take any questions, so you'll have to do that for me. What's going on? Anybody question? You got that look in your furrowed brow that someone's got something to say.
Well, Steve Holcomb is asking, did you photo the Atlas V launch?
I did not photograph the Atlas V launch. It was gorgeous last night. I saw it. Also, from our parking lot, we had the beautiful launch of the New Glenn rocket. Carlton Bailey was going to send me some pictures of that. We will wait and see those next week, okay? on Monday. Stay curious. But yeah, and then there's a two for tonight. Incredibly, SpaceX has got both launch pads, 39A and 40, launching at the same time. And is that actually going to happen, Marty? Have you seen anything about that?
I've heard nothing about it, and I can't believe they're
Would
going to
you
launch
mind
at the
going
same
over there and
time.
getting my one of my devices over there? I kind of feel naked without it, and naked is part of our theme today here. Yeah, I'll just take my phone. I must have my smart tablet laying around somewhere smart. I was going to look up on Spaceflight Now what that's all about, and some of you may. Certainly, they're not going to do simultaneous launches. That would be crazy. Maybe they'll do them a minute or two apart. But here's the humans orbiting Earth now. Um, and Carlton's texting me at 3:49. Hope they came through okay. Well, Carlton, we go live at 4 o'clock, buddy. I need a little more leeway than that. Uh, but we'll catch up, and I'll post them on Facebook, the pictures he took. It had to be a beautiful launched a photograph in the daylight of the New Glenn rocket, and then the return, successful landing of it. Meanwhile, we get back Shenzhou 20 tachionauts, 808 on pad 39A Starlink, and then they've got now at 8:55 the other pad. So within an hour, 2 launches. Wow, that'll be fun. Okay. And I take that back. That's 10 o'clock. All right, correct. 2200. That's 10:55 and 10:08. So that'll be a beautiful thing to see after a good dinner, maybe tonight. So, uh, also, we got the MS-27 crew is going to come back, I think December 7th or 8th, somewhere in there. There's a timeline early in December that they're going to come back, and that will leave 4 on the International Space Station and drop to 7 humans orbiting Earth until the next Crew Dragon 12 goes up. And I don't have the date on that. Someone wants to throw it out there to our social community, you're welcome to. So, all right, we've got, that's interesting. We got them back. Like I said, we're going to, this is them back, and they landed on land. The Shenzhou spacecraft is a knockoff of the Soyuz. All right. But we're going to talk about Apollo 12, November 1969. Let me get up my YouTube here. So, and this is here. We're going to talk about that in a little bit here. Let me poke you up there live. Soyuz. All right. Hear myself on there on delay. And we got Carlton. Yeah, Carlton said anyway, I don't have him, Carlton. Look through my mail. Sorry about that, buddy. But we'll check that out later. And one's at 10:08 and one's at 10:55. Carlton got me on that there. And the question was for Carlton, Steve Jokum said there, instead of me. But I used to be a photographer and go out there and do that good stuff. So, howdy, everybody out there. Hope that you enjoyed what we're going to talk about, some of the things you might not know about this crew. We had a wonderful conversation and talk on Apollo 12 with Steve Agid on Tuesday. Go back and check that out, and you will not be disappointed in what Steve brought up. Calling this mission one of the most important of NASA's for several reasons. One, it had to be a pinpoint landing, where Apollo 11 was off by almost 3 miles due to errors in calculating the mass concentrations of gravity around the moon. So they landed next to the Surveyor spacecraft. They had to learn how were the future missions going to deploy experiments and do other things on the moon that they wanted to do. What were going to be the logistics? How would they walk around or bounce around? They were going to do 2 EVAs of a couple hours each, not just one quick hour and a half on the moon and then get out of there. So we'll check all that out here in a minute, but we've got 2 wonderful birthdays to talk about one of our fun things here. As you notice, I have a Worm Friday t-shirt on today. Fred Haise, 92 years old. Freddo was born in Biloxi, Mississippi. All right. Um, he's a great friend of the American Space Museum as our president emeritus and ASM godfather, and one of our founding members, Charlie Mars, worked with Freddo as a retired NASA manager for Apollo. He's helped raise thousands of dollars for our museum and the Apollo and Shuttle monuments. 15 years ago, they raised $1 million, and he was a big part of that. 2 years ago, Hayes' book, Never Panic Early, was published, his personal and illuminating memoir of his career in the Apollo 13 successful failure of that aborted moon landing. A retrospective of his career. He survived a very bad airplane crash, actually, after his Apollo mission. And a Marine, hoorah. He would have been the commander of Apollo 19, the moon land, all right. He probably could have been in the queue earlier, like 17 or 18, but those crews are basically chosen. What popped into my head, of course, the Apollo 13 movie popularized him. 92 years old, there he is, with Hazel Seacack Banks in 2019 at the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 event here. Hazel was the secretary of the Apollo astronauts at the Flight Crew Training Building. And when she pops up in front of these old astronauts, she gets big hugs and wide-eyed grins, because it was a fun time, she said there. And in fact, she's going to make another appearance back in that time when she was part of the Apollo 12 parody on YouTube that I tell you all to watch. So maybe you'll watch it this season of Apollo 12, all right, on there. Fred looking good still. There he is with myself at the Grumman reunion, the last Grumman reunion they had celebrating Apollo 13. Look at that beautiful lunar module that Grumman has on their property. It's not in the cafeteria, Marty. Someone told me that lunar module's in their human resources department, so it's not well seen by the public apparently. But thank you, Marty Winkle. He was instrumental as the chairman of the Grumman reunions that are now defunct. You had probably a dozen of them over the years, did you, Marty? But just say something about your dealings with this man and what a wonderful human being he is.
He's just that, Mark, just like you said. He's so humble. He doesn't talk about space unless you ask him a question.
Yeah.
Or he's giving a talk.
Appreciates that he's alive every day. He really does, I think. And though he was like 80, this is probably 4 years ago, 3 years ago, so he was 88, 89 there. Had a nice conversation with him. He turned to me and said, Mark, where do I get a drink in this place? And they remember, Marty, they had the cocktail over at the other Quonset hut. This is a building. This is the Radisson, Cape Canaveral. He goes, where can I get a drink at this place? And I'm going, I'll take you right to it. And he grabbed my hand. He had a cane. He grabbed my hand. He says, I need help walking. And he grabbed my arm, and I walked him about that 100 feet over there. But some people, of course, saw him and stopped him and started talking. I let him talk for a little while there, and then he kind of just gave me a little like this for me to keep him going and get him out of that conversation. He's so nice. He was unbelievable. And I don't think he would know me to look at me now, but it doesn't matter. That was one of my many moments with this wonderful man that's done a lot for our museum. And he might remember me hanging out with Charlie Mars, but here's the ALT program, the approach and landing tests that was so important, okay, ALT. There's the patch. He and Gordon Fullerton, picture of Gordo here with him. Ooh, that's highly pixelated out. So let me do it this way. They and the other crew of Richard Truly and Joe Pardon me? Joe Engle were the other pair that test flighted Enterprise on the drop tests that were so important in 1977 to understanding could this even work? Why take it to space if it ain't going to act like a 100-ton glider that you can set it down on anywhere that's a reasonably length airfields? And that's just what they did, and Fred was very instrumental that with Gordon Fullerton, Joe Engle, and Richard Truly. Of course, Truly and Engle later flew together on the STS-2, second flight of Columbia, which I say you don't have a reusable spacecraft if it doesn't get reused. So STS-2, I think, is very underrated. And Engle and Truly have passed on, so has Gordon Fullerton. And Haise is the only one of that group alive at age 92. So God bless you, buddy. Hope you're having a wonderful day. I know he's getting a lot of love from space hipsters and other social media communities. He's very social media savvy gentleman in the past, so I'm sure he's getting a lot of love. Maybe you send him a personal thank you. Also, another happy birthday to a wonderful astronaut who really made a difference, and that's five-time spaceman Ken Bowersox, turning 69 years old today. Born in Bedford, Indiana. No, he's born in Portsmouth, Virginia, but he considers Bedford, Indiana to be his hometown. And let me back up there just a second on Freddo. Born in Biloxi, Mississippi, he does a lot there. They have a big statue to him there. Also, he's very involved with the Infinity Science Center at the Louisiana-Mississippi border, technically in Pearlington, Mississippi. So he lives in the Houston area now. But let's get back to Sox there. Sox is 59. Portsmouth, Virginia claims him where he was born, but he considers Bedford, Indiana to be his hometown, which is the real hometown of our buddy Charlie Walker, our favorite commercial astronaut. And he received a Bachelor of Aviation Aeronautics from the Navy, and then went to engineering school in Columbia University. 211 days in space. Is that right? That doesn't seem right. 5 missions should give that's not correct. But he has he was a pilot twice, 50 and 61 on a Hubble repair, and then commander of 73 and 82, another Hubble mission there. And that's only 4, so I'm missing one. Oh, yeah, he did serve as Expedition 6 crew commander for 5.5 months on the ISS. So there's where you get 211 days in space. All right, and he went up on, forget which one he went up on. So he was involved with the astronaut safety and assurance. Sox is his nickname, Bowersox. There he is in space. And recently we talked about him throwing out the baseball at the 1995 Atlanta Brave Cleveland Indian World Series there with his crew there of STS-73. That included Kathy Thornton and Katie Coleman there. So awesome. All right, let's get to Apollo 12 and landing on the moon, okay? Let's see here. We got some conversation going there. Celentano's led him a couple times. He was at his STS-50 launch. That's good. Never Panic Early is the book there, Dean Babcock. Steve Jokem's, of course, on top of that. Marty, what kind of a read is that? Do a little mini book report there for me while I take a swig of courage.
Say that again, Mark?
You read the book Never Panic Early by Fred Haise, and what would we find out about that, or what do you remember about it?
No, I don't really recall a lot about it, Mark. I mean, I read the book, but I really don't recall much.
Okay.
Sorry.
I do remember your comment was you wished it was longer, that he wished that you were craving more because it was a good read. And
yeah, and I know I spoke with him afterwards, and he had to reduce the size of the book. It was just too long. I think it was going to be like over 500 pages.
Oh.
But the publisher had him reduce it.
Well, those manuscripts should be worth reading to us space geeks, huh? We'll find out about that later. But hope he's having a great birthday today. All right, let's get to Apollo 12. Why do I have this picture there? Because that's President Kennedy with all the big shots of NASA and Vice President Johnson there unveiling what they thought the moon lander would look like. Okay, look at those long legs, Marty. Way long out there underneath that thing. Today's engineers don't understand that. The moon is very rocky and cratered, and they need some long legs there. But of course, it turned into the lunar module we know. President Kennedy saying we were going to do this before the end of the decade, not because it was easy, but because it was hard and because we would learn and be leaders of the world because of this. And by golly, we did it twice before the end of the decade, President Kennedy. And I'm so proud of that as an American that we just hammered it down and said, "You commies, take this." And of course, Russia never denied that we landed on the moon. That's one of the biggest arguments for the fact that you're not. Well, I'm tempering my voice here. Like I said, the moon hoaxers. I just like to say, well, you just don't have a very good education, do you? So we'll leave it at that. Apollo 12 with the fourth star in the sky to represent the fallen C.C. Williams, who was going to be the pilot instead of Alan Bean. Of course, all three Navy men, thus they have the Yankee Clipper theme. And Intrepid was the name of the lunar lander. LM number 6 was the tail number of that. There's the crew. Usual posed NASA publicity photos there with the type of clothing they wore when they were in the spacecraft. And there they are looking like they're outside the flight crew training building, leaning against one of their gold Corvettes. I don't think I got a picture of the Corvettes in there. But of course, Pete was the smallest of the astronauts at 5'6", but that gap tooth of his from the Gemini days was always something people noticed. And there they are after the landing, I think, or maybe not, maybe during some training with their T-38 jet there in their work overhauls. Can't get enough of seeing the Saturn V rocket being hauled out to the pad, particularly the aerials, which had to have been done by helicopters or airplanes, and not actually, you had to have a lot of priority to do that. And the launch, and we've had people that have been there that said it was a very drizzly day, bad weather. President Nixon was there, the only sitting president to watch a moon landing, and he was there with his wife Pat under an umbrella. It was actually drizzling. Why would they want to launch at that time? Part of it is the phases of the moon change, of course, within hourly. The shadow detail as daylight is revealed or darkness is enveloped, depending on what phase you're in. So if they would have waited another day or two, then it would have been more light over the landing area and less dramatic shadows and a little harder maybe to do it. So if they would have scrubbed it, they would have scrubbed it maybe for a full month cycle of that lunar deal. So that's one explanation I had. I think it was risky. And you watch what Steve Agate said about the lightning strike. There was a lot of kismet involved, and none other better than the fact that Werner von Braun, let's just show that, the launch, that's one of the only pictures of it taken, actually hit twice by lightning, just as it left the pad, and then about a minute later, you can see the streaks of rain in the photograph here. And of course, John Aaron became famous as telling Bean to set SEC to AUX, all right? And the SEC was a systems routing to take all of the energy come from the batteries instead of the fuel cells, so that they would get the fuel cells were down. And I think that's the explanation. And if not, someone will correct me. Another strike at the pad there. All right, and this SEC to AUX saved the whole mission, as the data was then coming through a different channel than the one that had been knocked out by the circuit boards, and everything's going, lights are going on, and they're fearing for their lives, yet the astronauts are just going through the checklist like everything was going to be okay, which it was. And one reason why it was okay was the fact that the Saturn V rocket had its own set of computers that was guiding the rocket, and the command module had its own control system that was separate. Had the all the command module been controlling everything, including the Saturn V, they would have spun out of control in that blackout period where they were scrambling to find what to do, and would have, gone, and it had been bad. Structurally, the Saturn V would have come apart, and so forth and so on. So the instrument unit, the 6 foot smallest stage of the Saturn V rocket, right below the angled slaw that the lunar module's in, a space launch adapter. Uh, that is why this did not blow up or be worse than what it was. Our moon ship. I love putting the model together on my docent tours and telling people, here is our moon ship that went to the moon. Not very Star Wars or Star Trekky looking, okay? And then the humans can only be in the connected part. They can't be in the part where this is the descent stage, and they can't be in the conical part of the command module, because that's all avionics and fuel cells and all the life support systems that they need, and later on an equipment bay with photography in it. So that was our moon ship. 3 days there, and then when we came back, they just came back with the command module. And there's the separation, the beautiful pictures we love to see, the lunar module over the highlands. They separated about 10 miles above the lunar surface, and then came down in a program that Marty's going to do a program for us one day on that, on the DSKY, okay, the DSKY computer. Of course, they studied moon maps that were put together by the lunar orbiter of the 1966-67 era. There was 4 of them. They actually processed the film on board the spacecraft and scanned it like a fax machine and sent it back. That's why you see some of these weird patterns in there. This was the ellipse where they were going to land, and in the center of the ellipse is the crater where the Surveyor 3 spacecraft landed 2.5 years earlier. And this was a target that they wanted to go to for pinpoint landing. It was near the equator, of course, and we could see how a spacecraft handled the harsh environment of no atmosphere and 2.5 years of being bombarded by micrometeorites and solar radiation and solar storms like we had on Earth here with all the beautiful aurora. And that is good data that, you would think would be good for future dwellings on the moon. But 56 years later, they probably won't even look at it. Here is the look at the lunar module. This is a photograph taken, an incredible photograph taken by the India spacecraft, okay? This is Surveyor in the highest resolution ever taken. Marty, if I can point out here, let's see, maybe if I make it smaller and I'll show you. That's the lunar module, and this is the Surveyor right over here. So when I make it bigger, now you can see their footprints that they went around over to the Surveyor there at 3 o'clock inside there. Again, the Surveyor's kind of dark, shadow that it's casting, and it's right here. That's the Surveyor spacecraft right there, and that's Intrepid. And they walked around the crater, all right, like this. They didn't dare go down and dip down because they didn't know if there could be maybe a cave underneath there that they would fall through. The first EVA, they went over here to this crater, and then one up here and set up the science experiment. And then they slept and went out the next second EVA down here. Landing on November 19th at about 3 in the morning Eastern Standard Time. And then, of course, the video camera color got pointed at the sun with the lens cap off of it, and it fried the electronics, and we didn't have any video of it. There we go again. Isn't that gorgeous? Just amazing. Look at this crater down here at 12 o'clock, at 6 o'clock, a double impact from something after all those other craters that were there. Again, the small arrows point to the walking around, the actual like trudging in snow. The lunar regulus sloshes out of the way. It does have a fluffiness to it, depending on what part of the moon you are. Apollo 14 had almost up to their knees in lunar dust. They would go up to. It's like a snow drift in some areas there. Pounded by micrometeorites for millions and millions and millions of years. All right. The moon's 4.5 billion years old, so 100 million years is not much time, and it just fluffs it up. What is micrometeorites, Marty asks? That's the dust that's on your furniture in front of you. Just go over there, Dave Stange. Oh, I know Julie keeps a perfect place. Okay, I'm not going to do that to you. How about Carlton? Go over there to that right next to you, your lamp table there, and just rub your finger on it. And yep, that's what we call cosmic dust motes in there, pounding stuff down. And this is the again the Apollo 12 lunar module taken by the India orbiter that's there. Wow, Marty, they're really getting down on it. And it's just, of course, the descent stage. Okay. That still had fuel in it and so forth when it landed. So there had to have been some outgassing and creaking and so forth over the time. Maybe something burst out of it over the years. But look at, you see there's their footprints coming in and out of it in the long shadow. And let's look at some real pictures of LM6 there with that Inconel is that dark, right there, the Inconel is the dark heat and cold resistant material that you put on there. That's the back side of it back there. Look at it. It almost straddled a crater to the left of it there. And the Surveyor spacecraft that landed 2.5 years earlier had a scoop on it. And you see the digging that the scoop would do. These were incredible to see the pictures in Time and Newsweek and Life magazine and of course the newspapers first, but it had a camera system on it that beamed back pictures, and then they basically took the pictures off of the TV screen to test the tensile strength and depth that they could move something into the lunar soil, and then we could judge, would we be able to land there? Look at the landing legs of this three, spread way out again, okay? Like all lunar landers should have their legs way, way out away from the body of there. The scoop's off there to the left. There's a picture that was broadcast to Earth of them scooping the first bit of lunar soil. Okay. We really didn't know if we would see, kind of layers to it. Maybe it'd be really darker. But it all proved to be about the same consistency and color. Because this is regolith that's been beat up for, like I said, a long time. And on Earth, you got layers of civilization that they dig up. Well, this is what they're hoping to find, some telltale signs of the lunar, what created the moon. And they did. And then they take pictures and do panoramas together. And this is when they figured out up at the top, wait a minute, we landed inside of a crater. We landed on the edge of a crater. That up at the top is not the edge of the lunar surface, 2-3 miles away. It's just a couple hundred yards away. And that's where Apollo 12 landed, right up at the top of your picture. You just barely see at 12 o'clock one of the pads of Surveyor there. And one of the most famous photographs of the Apollo era There you've got Intrepid up at the top. They erected a larger antenna, particularly for the color uh, live video they were going to do that didn't work out. There you see behind, this happens to be Pete Conrad. You couldn't tell who was Pete and who was Al because there was no way to identify them on their spacesuits. So starting with Apollo 13, they put red stripes around the thighs, the arms, and a red stripe down the helmet so that you could tell, or in black and white, you would see the dark band around the arm or the leg there. But they knew who took what pictures after debriefing, and this was Pete there. Before he was going to take a pair of snippers and snip it off, as well as the the scoop, and bring it back for analysis. Now, much to their dismay, the landing up there, just 100 yards away, threw a lot of dust. They couldn't actually tell what dust had settled on the lunar surveyor because basically it was covered with dust from the lunar landing and the hovering that Bean did over there. So yes, it is contaminated somewhat by our own landing, this whole area. It was only with Apollo 12 or 14 and the rickshaw they were able to get away from what would be the contaminated area of the lunar exhaust coming down from the LEM. And then, of course, 15, 16, and 17 had the lunar rover to go to pristine areas. But it was covered with a lot of dust, but they think a lot of that came from the landing. And I'll make a couple there's the camera that broke, all right. And they, as Steve Agid tells us, this was brought in late in the training, meaning like the last couple months, and Al Bean hadn't had a lot of training with it, and he's just thinking, I got a movie camera at home, I know what to do. Little did he think that he would accidentally, have the lens pointing up instead of down. He probably didn't have it down. The lens cap was off when it was up, and it got fried. And I think that was really a sad thing to happen because I think it contributed to the apathy because after Apollo 12, we had Apollo 13 was a successful failure. So we had to wait almost 3 years until April 71, or when was Apollo 14? Apollo 14 is February of 71. So about a year and a half, November 70, a year and a half in between landings. Had a failure, had one success, had one that we didn't see many pictures of, movies that turned people on. So I think it just contributed to some of the apathy. This was a big deal that Bean had to see how to maneuver the ALSEP, the Apollo Lunar Experiment Package, and picking it up like weighted barbells on each side. They didn't have any kind of wheeled vehicle. They hadn't thought about taking that because, one, they didn't know what the wheels would look like on the lunar environment. All right. And I think you really need those big balloon wheels that you see on beach carts. But they did have a rickshaw on 14 that had wheels on it. But they basically pulled it. It didn't wheel very well. I think the wheels were too thin on it. But there's Bean taking the ALSEP out of one of the lunar quadrants. All right. I would guess that would be 1, 2, quad 3, Marty's what I'm thinking. Am I right? Marty's nodding yes, quad 3. The quads are looking from the landing ladder. Quad 1's left, 2's the back, 3, and then 4 would be on the other side of the ladder. Here's Al and Pete doing one of these experiments, practicing with it, what he's got here to deploy out there. Again, a lot of these astronauts said this was just, they had to spend a lot of their own time doing this. There wasn't a long structure to do the science experiments. They were designed to be self-explanatory, not self-explanatory, but easy to operate and set up. And on Apollo 16, of course, the heat flow experiment, John Young got tangled up in the wires, which I thought was stupid to have that kind of wiring out there like that. They should have known better, but and that experiment never worked right. And there is one of the bigger things of this was that round steering wheel looking device right here is the power unit for the ALSEP. That was an RTG, radiothermal isotope generator. In other words, some radiative material. What am I thinking of, Marty? Yeah, what kind of material? Uranium. Be uranium or something like that. Probably a little pellet of it about the size of a marshmallow. But there wasn't much protest about that, like it was when they found out there was RTGs on the space shuttle. Um, and I'm looking at some of the comments here, and Dean Babcock says a nice tribute to intense training simulations thrown at the crew and mission control. Absolutely. And uh, okay, not too many comments there, so I've not made many mistakes, huh, Marty? And do you all own this? I know you do, Steve Jokums. This is a set of 3 astronauts, actually. I think in my set, it's Charlie Duke, Bean, and Conrad, even with his teeth gap there, in this cool 3-pack by some model company. It was actually a doll company that put these out. And so I thought I'd throw that in there for fun. The arms move, the hats, the helmets come off and on. Fun to play with, right? Jokums? Of course. You all know that. Who's got that? Nobody's saying yet. Here's the RTG being pulled out. Okay. That's what the handle was there for. He had to use some care to do it. You look around at what's going on, and you see this is very early in the first EVA because he's not very dirty. Okay, his boots aren't covered with that lunar regolith that cling to you like charcoal. Think charcoal in your backyard. And can you put some charcoal without getting a smudge on it somewhere in your hands that turns onto a smudge on your face? And your wife says, Dave Stangy, you know, you got charcoal on your face there. So we all know what I'm talking about. But this is very early. You don't see many footprints. Also, you don't see much litter around the lunar module. And yes, they had some fun where they had on their arm above here was a script of where they should be. All right, like you see football players now have the quarterback's got his plays on there. Well, NASA invented that. And as a little levity, they would have a, well, let's just face it, a nude Playboy model. And it would say things like, have you seen any interesting hills or valleys? Okay. And when this cropped up during the live transmission, well, Pete said, What in the world? What's this? Oh, yeah, I see a hill or valley right now." They had some comments to make. So uh, please don't take this as a sexist or comment or thing like that. This was part of their era, and it is blocked out there, the women there. So kind of a theme, though, nice looking women with Apollo 12. Here is the camera that's at the Smithsonian, brought back to Smithsonian. I've got a little note here that many of you may have heard the urban legend that this camera contained Streptococcus mitis, okay, was alive in this a common bacteria on Earth which causes the cold, okay. When the camera was returned from the moon and analyzed, they found this common bacteria, Streptococcus mitis, alive in the camera, all right? And had it not been sterilized prior to launch, okay? What was the possibility? Was it contaminated? So they're thinking that it was contaminated while it was before it went to the moon, and that the Streptococcus mitis survived the harsh moon environment for 2.5 years, which would be amazing. Which it's 2 weeks of 200 degrees above zero, followed by 2 weeks of about 200 below zero Fahrenheit. So quite a swing. How could something like that survive? Well, they did a research paper back in 2011, a microbe on the moon, okay, that assessed the validity of the claims that that the Streptococcus had indeed survived for nearly 3 years on the moon. The paper concluded that the presence of microbes could more likely be attributed to poor clean room conditions rather than the survival of after the mission. Poor clean room conditions after the mission rather than the survival of bacteria on the moon. Paper also discussed the implication that this incident would have for contamination control in future missions. Okay, there's some people that still argue that that's not right. They think uh, that this would be expected. Um, and the Discovery Channel covered this when we left the moon in a program entitled "The Return of the Moon Bugs." All right, so they think it was a breach that took a sterile procedure that took place that included a false positive. Part of this was the Surveyor 3 camera was returned to the moon in a nylon duffel bag and was not in the type of sealed airtight metal container used to return lunar samples of the earlier missions. It is therefore possible it was contaminated by the astronauts and the environment in the Apollo 12 capsule itself. Okay. So there's a little bit of that urban legend there. I'm going to side the fact that those Streptococcus, the cold virus bacteria, did not survive on the moon. It was put there after we brought it back from the moon. Something that I took a photo of is the scoop there at the Cosmosphere, at the wonderful Cosmosphere in Hutchinson, Kansas. A real offbeat bucket list. You will not ever regret that you went to Hutchinson, Kansas to see the Cosmosphere. And if you're there, about 2.5 hours away to the northeast, I believe, is another fabulous place that I will always remember, and that is the Eisenhower Museum and home up there of our great President Dwight Eisenhower, who is not given enough credit for his foresight that we would have a space program and it would be flourishing, and we needed to have money for it. Eisenhower knew that. It was a little bit of a political harangue. After all, he was the supreme leader of the Allied forces that won World War II, so he wanted to make sure that people thought we were going, or Americans were going to space for the good of everybody and not to conquer it. It's also known for after the Civil War, that was the depot where all the cattle that were out there during the Civil War roaming around that were wrangled up came through there and were brought back to their herds, so to speak, there. So, all right, Apollo 12. What else have we got to talk about? Beautiful panorama there. The astronauts would take that Hasselblad camera of 500 EL and they do a series of photos, and then they would be put together on Earth here. That's why you can see the astronaut taking the photo, the shadow, and then over there and there. And if you want to see some, I was going to do a program on that, and maybe I will next week. There is a Flickr page called Apollo Archives, and you can see every picture taken on the moon just like a roll of film. You can even see the sprocket holes on some of them. All right. And you see the bad shots. You see the leader that's exposed to light and flashed. There's some really cool pictures, and there's a lot of shadows of the guys on this. I couldn't find that folder that I was looking for of those. Let's see. So what else have I got to show here coming up is, oh yes, we're on our home stretch here. You got to watch Apollo 12 parody. Here it is on, you'll laugh, you'll have some fun with the guys. There's their vehicles that they drove out to the, they did this after they came back, and it's really quite a production. It's too drawn out of them doing the training on the moon, and it's just silly as can be. But it's even raining when they take their sports cars out instead of the bus to go to the Saturn V rocket. There they are training, and there's all kinds of paperwork to be done out there, it's just a hoot. You've got the Three Stooges are part of the the fun as they're behind a spaceship as they land there. And then, yes, there is a moment where Dick Gordon is orbiting the moon, and lo and behold, out of the lower bay comes up Hazel Seacack Banks. Yes, that's beautiful Hazel there. And she was part of this and took part in her green polka dot bikini. And my. Hazel, very, a very classy woman with a lot of dignity, also, I'll add, had a lot of fun with this. And she was there till Apollo 15. And when she uh, left NASA, they gave her this the movie. They gave her the 16 millimeter reel of this. She's the one that told me about Apollo 12 parody to watch it. So thank you, Hazel. We saw you earlier with Fred Haise, and now we're seeing you. Well, we're just seeing you there, and a lot of fun. You guys are going to enjoy that. By the way, there is a person on the left that's not Dick Gordon, and the person on the left is actually Al Warden. Okay, but you're not going to recognize Al. To tease you more, to watch Apollo 12 parody. It's about 25 minutes, something like that. Well, they land, and many of you don't realize they landed by parachutes in the ocean. Scorched capsule there with a box of rocks and some precious film magazines from the House of Blood cameras they left on the moon with those beautiful lenses. All right, we've got one here in our museum that the USIAC brothers used to photograph shuttle launches. So there they are, and they're getting ready to put on their, this is Apollo 12, so they have to put on their, I don't really understand that picture. I don't think that's the astronauts. Is that them before they put on their garb to go into quarantine? Yeah. Hampton, Virginia, at the museum there is where the Apollo 12 Kitty Hawk resides. All right. And we've got RG Jubilee knows that, don't you, dear? I was wondering where the hatch is for that. Okay, and a great story is this is the ring of Charlie Mars, friend of these astronauts, and of course birthday boy, 92-year-old Fred Haise. This he had taken to the moon and back to him by Pete Conrad. Pete Conrad asked him what he'd like to take to the moon. He said, "I'd like to take my wedding band." And he did, and then I think he sold it for a couple $1,000s at one of our auctions not too long ago, though he's still married to Barbara. Thank you, President Kennedy, for the foresight to want our country to go to the moon and return men safely before the end of the decade. We did it twice, and then we did it 4 more times, and even the failure of Apollo 13 taught us a lesson not only about the Apollo program and the hardware, but about ourselves as humans, as the whole world was pulling for Apollo 13 to make it back safely. And whatever your politics are, this was a moment in history that will always be tied to President John F. Kennedy. And though history can write whatever they want about him, that he wasn't that into it and doing it politically or whatever. His assassination on November 22nd, 1963 was the reason why we did it, despite the tragedy of Apollo 1, because they were not going to let him down. We being you, Marty, and all of your wonderful Apollo workers universally tell me that because Kenny said we were going to do it, we were going to do it. Am I correct, Marty? Was that some of the sentiment?
Yeah. I definitely believe that. I think if he wasn't assassinated, we definitely would not have made it by the end of the decade.
Yeah, which means if he hadn't been assassinated, we might have done it in 1970 or 71, as long as we beat the Russians. But politics has really dictated our space program, and I think unfairly, we stopped the Apollo program. I, of course, as a teenager and a young man, thought that we were going to create our Antarctica-style bases on the moon, where we'd be shifting out 15 to 20 to 30 people a year to live there Antarctica's got a lot more people than that, of course, but you know what I'm saying is it's just as harsh and forgiving as and hard to get to, and here on Earth. And we never did that. And then we built a beautiful space station and ended the program that built it. We didn't go on and try and build a better one with maybe just 2 orbiters or something like that. The starting and stopping because of the political climate is really going to leave us in the dust, I believe, as my own personal opinion, as we're looking at a new moon race, not with Russia, but with China. And if China gets there first, my fear is that they will militarize the South Pole. They could do things like jam any of the radar signals coming in from other spacecraft that want to land, because where the water there in the moon is like gold. Okay, you can do so much with it, just not keep humans alive, but make fuel and grow food. So this is a new era we're at, and I see some movement in the private community with Blue Origin's Blue Moon and SpaceX's Starship, that these private companies just might go on their own. Okay, as long as the FAA allows them to launch and with all the standards and so forth. So a lost opportunity the last 50 years to not only really put a foothold on a new place for humans to live, which a lot of the foundations and other societies out there, like our friends, the National Space Society, are all about popularizing, putting humans on Mars and other places because our world is terminal to some extent. Everything has a lifespan, including our sun that gives us life, is only going to last for another 4B with a billion years before it changes into a super giant star, swallows us up. And you're like, billion years, Mark, who's going to worry about that? Well, it ain't like we're going to worry about it. It's like we need to prepare humanity to live in the rest of the universe if there is going to be humanity throughout the universe. So Apollo 12, what an amazing mission. 3 great friends. They've all passed on. Al Bean, of course, became a wonderful artist, and we've had shows about that. Pete Conrad, Marty, was involved with the Delta Clipper, okay, with Deke Slayton, the first, what they wanted to be reusable spacecraft that looked like a kind of a pyramid, narrow pyramid structure. That was ahead of its time. And Dick Gordon, I think, just had a good old time being a retired astronaut. If you've been around Dick Gordon, he got a big belly of drinking beer and having fun, and a great guy. And they are all buried within sight of each other's graves at Arlington National Cemetery as wonderful Navy men. So let's see if I gotta say, apologize for anything on here. Doesn't look like it. Um, and everybody looks like they're having a good time. Good Friday to you all, folks. Rosalie, go outside and get you some starshine. It's going to be a beautiful week of stargazing. The astronomy community sending emails out. Biolab, anyone? Biolab is a boat dock north of Kennedy Space Center on Route 3 that has a dark northeast view that we go stargaze at a lot. So Steve Jokums, hope that you have a wonderful weekend. Doug Forrest is in Los Angeles. Jokums is up in Illinois. Tom Usiak's in Pennsylvania. Dean Babcock is, I believe, also in Illinois. Carlton Bailey is just down the road at Cape Canal Groves. And Freeway of Other, not sure where that person is, but we're glad that you've joined us and hung with our family of space geeks here on Stay Curious. Tom Celentano, always smile when I see your name up there in Connecticut. Janet Gretsch, thank you for watching. Chris Callie is on there today. Masquerading as Jacqueline. Cliff Watson, Michael Bruno. What Cliffy down in Australia. Now, what threw me off, Chris is going to say, he's saying, Mark had a whole show in Apollo and he didn't show one of my pieces of artwork today. No, I didn't, Chris, but I'll make it up to you. You know I'm going to talk about Apollo 12 again. But he's an awesome artist and does celebrate the Apollo era with his montages and other wonderful artwork. Chris Callie, thank you, Bo. Cliff Watson, hope you're feeling good. He's undergoing a medical scare down there in Australia. And Michael Bruno down in Miami. All right. Michael, did any of those iguanas drop out of the trees? Did it get that cold down there, Marty? I didn't look, but I was down there one time, and it was so cold that iguanas were laying on the ground. That was funky to see. So, yes, go ahead, Marty.
Also, Sam V100 is watching. He's from Rio de Janeiro.
How about that Rio? Oh my gosh, I want to get some castanets and start clicking around there. Thank you so much for watching us today and staying curious. We do this program every weekday at 4 o'clock because I am crazy. I'm crazy about space history. I'm crazy about sharing the passion here on the Space Coast. But I'm most crazy about the American Space Museum, where you are in the birthplace of America's space age every time you're here. And many of you have been, and those of you that haven't, come and see us. Marty, that's enough for me today. Come and see me, Mark Marquette, because I'd love to shake your hand and, like we've done today, bridge the space between us. Go Apollo 12.